What's going on, guys? I'm your host, Aaron Lloyd, and this is episode 63 of The Creation Ground. 63. Before I get into our next spectacular, magnificent guests, I want to encourage you, yes, you, to like, share, subscribe, tell people about the podcast. They'll be enlightened, educated, motivated, inspired, and all of that. Chances are that you've seen my next guest's work somewhere. If you've seen Harry Potter, Jurassic World, Jungle Book, the most recent Jungle Book, the most recent Lion King, Iron Man 3, Tron, and the list goes on. You've seen their work. They are in VFX. They do animation, general VFX, and they also teach artists how to get into that space as well. And in this episode, they talk about how the world of filmmaking is evolving and how they're kind of on the cutting edge, pioneering aspect of that. They teach classes to help animators and filmmakers and even actors utilize this space because it's a space that is influencing not just the filmmaking industry, but fashion and architecture and things like that. In this episode, we cover a lot. They talk about how they got interested into that space in the first place, what they wish audiences appreciated more. They talk about how, if you are interested in the space, how you can get involved and the resources to do so. And a lot more. This episode's really enlightening. I enjoyed it. They talk about their experiences on the films I just mentioned, and much more. Enjoy this episode with Jackie and Ed. Welcome to another episode of The Creation Grounds. I have some animators on here, Jackie and Ed. They're fantastically blessed and talented at what they do. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Good to be here.
Sure. So you guys are animators. What's your favorite animated character from the past or present of all time? Each respectively.
Good question. Well, I would probably firstly say more specifically that we're visual effects artists, animation being a part of what we do, but Jackie's a digital compositor and I'm a CG generalist, CG supervisor. So on top of that, to answer your question, what are our favorite animated characters of all time? I don't know, for me it's probably something slightly more obscure, like the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, because that's what started my whole love of computer graphics. It's not really a character as such, I don't know, but Jackie probably has a more interesting answer.
Well, I mean, I was really into the X-Men, like the cartoon X-Men, and I used to watch them all the time, and I was always really into Storm. I just thought she's kind of awesome.
You said it's a visual effects artist and animator. What are the two distinguishment? What's the distinguishment between the two?
Well, yeah, good question. So I guess an animator to us would be somebody who spends most of their day bringing characters to life. They may not actually make the character in the first place. That might be a character artist that does that. But it depends on whether you're talking about 2D animation or 3D animation. 2D animators traditionally would draw frame after frame, so they would make the character and bring it to life at the same time. And in our world, they're usually two different people. Somebody would make the character, and an animator would actually be more akin to an actor, really. An animator possesses the characteristics of an actor, as well as having the technical skill to be able to implement the motion. They're also thinking like an actor and behaving like an actor. They often pre-act their scenes. They'll actually get in front of a camera and act out a scene, film themselves, and then go in and replicate that motion. But they're really kind of thinking like an actor. No, that'd be my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, it's they make it move and they give it life. And so it's one aspect of the pipeline, I guess I would say. And not every shot that you do for the movies needs an animator. Sometimes, like for Storm, for instance, a lot of the lightning stuff wouldn't necessarily have an animator at all. It would be, it might even be hand-drawn lightning, and that would be something that I would probably be taking on. So, it's just sort of one modality inside of the bigger wrapper of being visual effects.
That's nice.
So we would animate things, but what I would class as an animator is somebody who would kind of sit there doing that particular part of it all day, whereas we might be building an environment or compositing a character with a live action background, and as Jackie said, adding some elements to it. There's a lot of different pieces to it, and animation is a specialism. I animate, Jackie animates, but we do other stuff probably more than we do that.
Nice. And how did you guys both get into that field? Like, where did that interest come from?
When I came to Los Angeles, I was one of those sort of starstruck girls that I wanted to get into the film industry. And I originally was going to do production, and unfortunately I just wasn't strong enough to, like, I really wanted to be a director of photography, but I knew I wasn't strong enough to carry all the cameras around. So I actually snuck into a visual effects house, and I interviewed for a job there. And I went up to a woman who was a really kind woman, and I said, "Do you have any internships available?" And I worked 6 months for free. She had all these sales packages for the visual effects house, and I was going to Disney, and I was going all over, and dropping off sort of care packages. And at the same time, after I was done with my day job in the evening, I was working on learning a bunch of programs. And so, yeah, that's how I started.
Yeah, so Jackie had the kind of Steven Spielberg entrance to filmmaking. She broke into the studio. I had a kind of weird, circuitous route. I guess I got interested in computer graphics when I was a kid, and I started tinkering around with my friends' computers, Commodore 64s and stuff like that. But then I got really more into the programming side of things, and I became a programmer. I became a software engineer. Which is not really it was what I wanted to be doing, but really what I really wanted to be doing was digital animation, 3D graphics. I wanted to make dinosaurs in the movies. So it happened a little later for me, and I retrained after having been a software architect for about 6 years, and retrained, and then pushed myself through. Took a year out of parties and seeing friends, and really got my head down, and pushed through into the industry. It took me a little while, but yeah, similar stuff to Jackie, I guess, at the beginning, of volunteering and doing all kinds of stuff for free, and just upskilling, and yeah, there's so many parts to it, but just, yeah, lots of grind, lots of hustle, lots of enjoying every minute of it. But yeah, certainly lots of stuff for free and voluntary work, and all kinds of things. Anything that had computer graphics attached to it, I would be there. I just tried to do everything I could in the beginning.
I love that. And I believe that either you had worked on Jurassic Park. Eventually, that became a reality for you. Is that true?
We both did, actually. Jurassic World, yeah, we both got to work on that movie, which was incredible, from many perspectives, getting to work together, as husband and wife, and best friends. It was super cool to be there and be able to be there together. And also, yeah, definitely a childhood dream of mine to work on that franchise. And I also, working at Industrial Light and Magic, I think, is probably most people's bucket lists who understand the visual effects and CG industry. So having all of that together, and they got us a really cool place to stay in San Francisco. I'd always wanted to live in San Francisco too. It was multiple childhood dreams come true for me. So yeah, I couldn't believe it personally.
I love that. Yeah, and I think that, for one, congrats on that. I love hearing stories like that where people dream of this for so long, and then it actually happens. And I was watching the movies that made us, and I realized just how much detail went into creating the dinosaurs for the first one and where we are now. So as a visual effects artist, you're creating these environments. You're creating just, they look so lifelike. How do you think that you guys view the world differently than everybody else? Are you guys looking for very specific details? You see a piece of grass on the floor, do you like, how is it different for you from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we can't really get down the street successfully because we're just there analyzing everything. We can't get out the front door. No, I mean, I think Jackie, you say the probably more sensible answer to that.
Well, I think when we go around I noticed yesterday we went to Starbucks to get a cup of coffee, and I was sort of glanced out the window and was noticing the dappled light on the ground on the sidewalk, and was just staring at it for a minute or two. And I think, you know, sometimes just visual stuff sort of captures us, and we'll mention it to each other. And yeah, I think every movie we watch, I think we can't help, but especially if it has visual effects, to kind of be analyzing it with our artist's eye. But you know, there's good and bad to it. But yeah, no, it's a very enjoyable thing to see it from that perspective, I think.
Yeah, I think being an artist, you naturally are more analytical, because you as a visual artist, you're always looking for reference. You're always but yeah, so basically what artists do is to look at the world and analyze it. Whether you're, depending on what type of artist you are, I think it depends what things you're noticing in things. So going back to this idea of animation, I know an animator that specializes in animation would be watching people walking past and looking at their gait and analyzing their motion, whereas a texture artist might be looking at the textures on them. The lighting artist might be looking at the light and how that's playing over them. It really depends what you're kind of zoned in on. I've definitely noticed doing generalism that depends what I'm doing at the time. It can get really weird sometimes if you're doing something quite abstract over and over again. You can kind of start seeing the world in that like in dots. You know, it can be a little odd, I find, especially if you're doing that really intensely for a long period of time. I used to be in work in Soho for years. That's actually where we met, in London, in Soho. There's like this little kind of Harry Potter bubble of a few streets where all the visual effects houses are, and I would be doing intense kind of UV mapping or modeling and seeing the world in dots and lines, and then I walk out and my brain's still seeing it in that way, and it's really hard for it to kind of shut that off. So I don't know, you go through these intense phases of really over analyzing the world, and it can become kind of annoying in a way, and then sort of backing off from that and trying. The times I think where I watch a movie that comes up that makes me forget about the visual effects in it is when I know it's an incredible movie, or when I'm not doing too much work, or one or the other. Or like when they make you forget about it and it disappears, I think that's when it's the best.
What's a typical day like? As an actor, I understand you come to rehearsal, you do that. There's so many components that create a film, and like the visual effects, like for Marvel, you guys have worked on some of that as well. And from my understanding, it's like years in advance of planning and getting that done to get to the final product. What's a typical day like in creating that for you guys?
Well, I think if we're working for other people, it really depends on what we've been hired for. Normally, I'm a little bit more of a specialist than Ed is. So normally I come in for compositing, which means that a lot of the work has been done for me already. Although occasionally I'll be doing post-viz, which is sort of taking some very loose backgrounds and some green screen foregrounds, and I'll key it and put it on top and try and help them visualize maybe you know, where the green screen people are going to be inside of the shot, and helping them with framing and that kind of stuff, and making sure the handles work and the edit works and that kind of stuff. But normally I'm putting together final shots, and so what will happen is I'll be keying out the green or the blue, and then I'll be putting like potentially a CG background, and I'll be adding shadows, and so I'll be doing that sort of for maybe a, you know, on a film, I might have 5 to 10 shots at a time that I'm working on over maybe a period of 6 months. And so I'll be just kind of like do one, render it, give it to my supervisor, get notes on it. And then, you know, while I'm waiting on notes, I start on the next one. And so for me, it's a bit like that. And, but for Ed, it just depends on what they've hired him for, because as a generalist, he's done all kinds of different things. So.
Yeah, and being a a CG 3D generalist, there definitely isn't really a particularly typical day, but and it depends what you're doing that day. You probably break down a project into a bunch of tasks. You might give all those tasks to different people. If you're a supervisor, you might spend a bit more time working with people and QCing things and helping troubleshoot things and problem solve. So that's a lot of what I've been doing the last 10 years. Being on the box a bit, actually doing actual work. It just depends which piece you're jumping in to do. But yeah, work, as Jackie said, if you're working for a client or studio, you would usually be given a set of tasks. You probably know what you were going to do the next day. You would be focusing on the modeling of something, or if it depends on the scale too. So going from small studios to big studios, as a generalist in a small studio, you might do an entire shot yourself. You might do all the modeling, rigging, animation, texturing, lighting. That's feasible in a small, more commercials kind of environment. Bigger studios, there's the higher standard and lots more work to do. So there's more of a specialism kind of approach. So you might more likely to be doing the same type of thing every day in the world of movies, although it is changing a little bit. And then there's virtual productions coming in. We're going through a kind of a revolution in filmmaking at the moment that is bringing more generalists into the world of filmmaking. As a result of that, it's kind of bringing a bit more of the philosophy of generalism into movie making and bringing the film making side closer to the visual effects side. So there's a lot of change going on at the moment as well, without going too far down the rabbit hole.
And what do you wish that audiences kind of appreciated more about all the intensive work that you guys do?
Well, I think I'm going to go down the rabbit hole maybe just a little bit more. So I want to talk a little bit about virtual production, because I think discussing this revolution that's happening right now, I think it's going to be affecting everyone from actors to productions to everything. And so I think understanding that LED walls are coming, and that instead of acting in front of a green screen or blue screen, you'll a lot of the times be acting in front of a big LED wall or a volume. And the reason for that is because a lot of times there'll be productions where it doesn't exist, like you're on the moon, and it doesn't make sense to you're gonna, instead of having it green screen or blue screen, you make the moon and then you run it on a game engine directly onto the LED wall, and then you're acting in front of it, and you're getting the lighting that you've created from the moon atmosphere, and you're getting everything just looks more correct than if you're and a lot it's a lot faster to get to that result. And so that to me is really exciting. And then the other thing that's really exciting about this is that there's a lot of pre-made assets that you can access for free, and the game engine itself is free. So when you upload Unreal Engine and then you get mega scans, individuals can actually start telling their own stories and making their own art. And that is the revolution that's happening right now, is that people are coming and taking our classes who are maybe just artists, like straight up artists, but they've never done 3D in their life, but they're able to create these beautiful, after 8 weeks, they're able to create these beautiful 2-3 minute projects. And that accessibility hasn't really existed before.
I love it. So has what we've been covering kind of predated and archaic? It seems like it's going in a different, the LED, and there's is the Unreal Engine a new technology that is now going to shift the industry as a whole?
So it's not really a new technology, I would say, but it is sort of the software and the hardware are getting good enough to the point where it is going to start changing the way that filmmaking is done as a whole. And so we're it's an emerging technology now that is going to be displacing a lot of the current pipelines. And yeah, Ed, do you want to sort of take over on that thought?
Sure, yeah. I mean, as Jackie said, it's all like improvements on stuff that's been around for a very long time in some ways. You know, the idea of rear projection has been around going back to 1930s. That idea of putting actors in front of a artificial background, you know, going back that far to the genesis of that idea, and actually projecting something's been filmed through a projector onto a screen behind people that are in a car or walking along or whatever. They didn't have visual effects back then, so they kind of needed to do it as practically as that. And then visual effects came in, and green screens were very useful, being able to get the foreground off the background and then do all of the background in CG and put everything together, but it kind of misses the immersion part of it. I think it's, and then as we've reintroduced the ability to use game engines, is really helping take that rear projection idea and make it dynamic. Where with rear projection in the 1930s, it was completely fixed. It was playing. You couldn't do anything to it. You couldn't move the camera. You couldn't get any parallax in the background. And now you can load in dynamic world into that background, so you can actually move the camera now and change things in the background. You have so much more control over that. It was really a very old idea, but the new thing that's happened now, as Jackie said, is it's a confluence of the hardware and software being capable of starting to do these things. And a few movies have been very key in waking that up, and then going from that sort of Avatar and using virtual cameras and simulcam, and going through Jungle Book and Lion King, which I had the good fortune to work on.
You worked on Lion King or the Jungle Book, or both?
Both, yeah.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was cool. It was, it felt like this weird sidestep, and a lot of people, I think at the time, didn't really, they understood previs, but this was a new type of previs, and it felt quite exciting, but also a bit of a risk at the time. Is this going to be something that's going to put my career on pause for a bit whilst they go and play with this experiment? And it turned out that that led into Lion King, and then Epic Games got really interested at the end of Lion King, and really took on the development of the tool set in the Unreal Engine, and used the Mandalorian to really dig that in and production test it and implement it. That whole kind of progression through a number of years and several projects is really what's kind of made the world, the Mandalorian is what made the world aware of it. Even with, to go back to Jungle Book and Lion King, it was all kind of being done then in the state that it was in Unity at that point. But the Mandalorian was really what kind of woke people up in the world to it, I think, is the addition of the LED wall and being able to actually immerse the set visibly while you're on set into that world, was the kind of extra icing on the cake in that. We didn't have that in Lion King, didn't have any live action in it. Jungle Book did have live action in it, so we were doing simulcam, and it was a lot of blue screen. So yeah, it's still evolving, it's still finding itself. I think, as Jackie said really well, it's now also because of Epic Games having so much faith in it, putting so much work into it, and allowing their product out for free. It's just meant the whole world has got excited about this, and the development's gone even faster because of that. More people are interested in it. It's accessible to everybody, where when we were doing it on Lion King, it was only accessible to people in that warehouse making the Lion King. And at the end of the movie, that all disappeared, all the tools disappeared. Now we're getting to see the improvements all the time, and the world can play with it. It's a really cool time.
It's incredible.
We're getting heads of studios and some of the head artists from studios coming and taking our class, because everybody, wants to sort of understand this new technology and see where it's see where it's going to go.
So it seems like this technology is like you guys are kind of pioneering, or this idea is kind of like a pioneer. It's going to be what Jurassic Park was to filmmaking back then for now going forward. It seems like.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those moments where, I mean, that was a huge one. I still watch Jurassic. I think watched it the other day. I still love watching that movie because, you know, all those years later, it still holds up. But that was taking such a massive step forwards in filmmaking that people kind of couldn't believe what they were looking at. And I think that some of the other movies, like, you know, Avatar's another one, which really opened people's eyes, even though it was building on top of what had been seen before. It really took it to another level. This new technology is another moment. Like, yeah, I guess you could say like that. You know, especially when you're working in it, it really is changing the workflow. I mean, I think what the customer, what the viewer sees at the end of the day is important. And to your previous question about what do we hope people would appreciate more about the process, like I kind of hope that the viewer doesn't think about that at all while they're watching it. You know, that's my hope for the viewer. But as far as what's happening in production, it's just changing every aspect, from going through pre-production, story and development, all the way through to actual production and post-production. It's this set of technologies is changing the workflow in every aspect, every part of the pipeline. And I think watching people, now we run this school and are teaching people from beginner level or intermediate level, people who've got no experience in filmmaking whatsoever, or people who've been in it for 40 years and have been on, you know, some of these pioneering projects that we're talking about. Everyone's kind of back to square one again. It's really lovely how it's kind of leveling the playing field, and everyone's become more collaborative as a result, because everybody needs to learn from each other again. There's no kind of siloing of skill sets. It really has opened up the conversation a lot more. So it is definitely a revolutionary moment. It's really significantly changing the way things are done.
I love that. And you guys have a startup you mentioned where you're kind of helping people who are interested in that field come into that. Prior to getting into that, you dropped two major movies, and you've worked on Iron Man, Jurassic Park, and then Jungle Book and Lion King. What was it's just we have to talk about that. Those are big deals, right? What was your favorite part of? We don't have time for going through all of them, but what was your favorite element of working, or piece of working on some of those movies?
Yeah, well, I mean, Jurassic World stands out. Like I already mentioned, immediately it was my childhood dream when I was 15 or 14 to do that. No, to even just be in the building. You know, I bought the making of books when I was a kid, and I poured through them and looked at all the people involved in the studio, and to end up walking through the doors of that kind of museum of visual effects and filmmaking was incredible. Like standing at the elevator next to Dennis Muren, who was in that book I read when I was a kid. Like to be in the same playing field was an incredible experience. Just, I don't know, as a human being, even more than the specifics of the work, that was just incredible for me to feel like I made it there. You know, like that was 25 years or whatever it is, 23 years of going from that point of dreaming to actually being able to do something. It was a long journey, and just to actually be there at all was like an incredible sense of achievement and accomplishment, and thinking like, wow, I wonder what else is possible, kind of stuff. Is that was a huge one to me. There's a bunch of other things that I could talk about, of moments of doing actual work, and certainly Lion King was, and Jungle Book too, were moments of being part of something which was very new and different and very edgy and pioneering and uncertain, and probably like it felt being on Jurassic Park in the beginning, that nobody really knew what they were doing. It was an experiment that was proven in pre-production. You know, they didn't even know whilst they were making the movie that they were going to do it that way, and then found out as they were doing it. So some of those experiences in virtual production have been really cool in that way of just, yeah, being part of something where, you know, it's you're kind of changing the way that things are done whilst you're doing your job. Jackie, you've been doing this even longer than me.
Well, I was thinking the other day, like, you know what, actually one of my favorite parts that I worked on Iron Man ended up getting cut, but I'm kind of okay with that because I got to work on it for a really long time. But I was working on the opening sequence for Iron Man, and they basically had an alt take that ended up taking over just for story reasons. But getting to work on Iron Man flying down from the sky and landing in the snow was really cool and fun. And yeah, I mean, I guess on a number of the films I've worked on, I have sort of like my favorite shots, like on Harry Potter, on the last movie that I was working on, when the snake gets killed and all of the faces come out. I got to work on like all of the faces coming out of the smoke, and I got to composite that shot, which was sort of my favorite moment in the Harry Potter film, which is during that time was when I met Ed, actually. So yeah, I mean, I guess there's just all of these sort of, you know, or like on Jurassic World, Ed and I both worked on the final dinosaur sequence. And it was cool. I was compositing it, and Ed was working on like the muscle simulation system for the dinosaurs. And so yeah, we were both working on the same sequence, but in different parts. So
That's incredible.
You talked about you know, Tron as well being a really cool moment, getting to work on the thing, the teaser, the green.
Oh yeah. I for Tron, before it got greenlit by Disney, they actually wanted to test and see whether that it had a good fan base. And so it went to Comic-Con twice. One of them, the first time was just to see whether people would be interested in it. And then the second time it was done in stereo to see if people would be interested in it in stereo. And I got to work on both of them. And it was really cool to watch the evolution from the very beginning all the way to, you know, working on the film for 9 months. So that was a really fun project.
So how does one, because this is all new information to me. I know it exists within this, but like getting a deep dive on in terms like the mechanics and just the artistry of this is new to me. If there's some listeners that are interested in becoming visual effects artists or animators or want to do what you guys do, how would they get started? And then talk a little bit about what you guys have created to help people get started.
Sure. Yeah, so I get that question a lot. How do you get started? And the first place I go to is asking people what do you like doing the most? What do you want to do the most? Because I think a lot of people like those memes with 5 squares saying this is what my mum thinks I do, this is what society thinks I do, this is what I actually do. You know, the equivalent of that in visual effects is like well, now most people are sitting at home, but you know, before that you're sitting in a corner of a warehouse somewhere in front of a computer. Like, it's definitely not like running around the red carpet with George Clooney or I don't know, whoever is. I'm so out of touch with popular culture. It's the fact we work in it. We like don't have enough time to actually watch stuff. Anyway, sorry. So I would figure out what it is you love to do first, because the reality of doing it is that it's, you know, like anything else that has it's a lot more mundane than it may appear. It's very exciting, and if you love doing it, it can be the best thing in the world. But it's very important to figure out first what you enjoy, and the only way to do that is just have a go, get stuck in, try stuff out. Like, you're going to end up doing this stuff a lot, and sometimes they're under pressure, and sometimes long hours, and that can feel horrible if you're not into it, and it can feel wonderful if you're already into it. So it's important to kind of test the water and play with it first. And I think this is the best time ever to be able to do that, using tools like Blender and Unreal, which are free, and having the internet full of all this incredible information about how to use the tools and how to work in it. There's basically no barriers to entry. You can use a relatively cheap machine and actually get started and start having a go. I would suggest that everybody kind of starts there and has a play with it, and then if you get serious with it, I can't recommend, this isn't not just a shameless plug for our school, but I highly recommend getting some sort of education. It's exactly what I did at the beginning. There are people who are self-taught that get in. There's absolutely no reason why you can't do that. For me, it was a speed thing. I was teaching myself for years and going very slowly, and having moments where I almost felt like giving up because I didn't know the answers to things, and it was really, really difficult. When I started getting some education from industry professionals, that was the point that it all changed for me. I suddenly became part of a community. I had instant answers to my questions, and my growth curve just went from this painfully slow, like trying to figure things out, trawling around books. At the time, the internet wasn't very big at that point, which dates me for sure. But yeah, once you've tried it enough to know that you've got passion, feel that. Check your body when you're doing it. Is it something that really lights you up? Is it something that makes you excited? If it is, you want to take it further, I definitely recommend mentoring. However you put that together, finding somebody from the industry who's the way you want to do anything in life. Figure out what you want to do first. That's the hard part. Then figuring out how you do it, you go find someone that's done it and do exactly what they did, and then you should be able to do it too. It's not magic at that point. It really is quite just going through the motions in a way. That's why I say the hard part is figuring out what it is that you like, and the way to do that is experimentation. But our school that we've created is built for exactly that reason. Whether somebody's been in the industry for a while or they're just starting out, it's designed to help people learn the skills, be around other professionals who know what they're talking about and know the real answers to questions, as opposed to there's a tremendous amount of free material out there on the internet. That's one of the problems now, is there's so much stuff out there, and there's a lot of it is created by people who've not been working at a high level in the industry. And they may know just about how the systems work, but that doesn't mean they know how you use it in production, which is a very different kettle of fish. And especially if you want to punch up to the kind of world-class level, that requires really, really upskilling. It's not just enough to know your way around the interface of a piece of software. You have to have all these other skill sets too, understanding production, having a really great eye. All the fundamental stuff is super important, and that's what we help people with, because people helped us along the way, and we're at this point where we've got to do some really cool things, and we want to keep doing those cool things, but we really want to help give back. We really want to help other people have those opportunities. And there's no greater pleasure to me now than to see somebody, having gone through one of our programs, go out there into the world and have some success with it. That's the best.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to sort of say was that this technology is not only displacing the film industry, although I know that that's kind of what we're talking about, but it's also displacing the fashion industry, automotive, all kinds of different architecture,
tech in general.
Yeah, it's displacing a lot of different fields. So this isn't only something to be considered for the film industry. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there, that yeah, it's changing digital creativity.
And for within the film industry, I don't know what types of interests your listeners have mainly, but if there's actors in your audience, then this is also really useful to them, understanding the nuances of acting for virtual production, which involves mocap, and being able to work in that environment, understanding the nuances of that, but also being able to do this stuff at home now. An actor can actually set up a small business using virtual production technologies. They can get a very affordable mocap suit at home, remote session with a director on the other side of the world who can be telling them what they want, and then they're acting it out, and it's puppeteering something in a character in CG, but they're actually recording that mocap data and sending it across, and that's an actual service that they can provide remotely in their own homes. So it's something that's really immediately useful to.
Yeah, and then the other thing I was going to add to what he just said was that a lot of actors, I feel like, are also writers and directors and that kind of thing. And being able to pitch your own project, and rather than using images and slides, you make your pitch as a visual video. And I think it gets the point across a lot better, especially now that you can, for free, you have these digital humans that look amazing that are, you download into the game engine, and you can really get an idea and be able to share your vision in a much sort of cleaner way. So
yeah, without having to go through what we've had to go through of decades of being in studios and understanding how all this stuff works, learning the tools, learning the workflows. Now there's this way in where you can be an actor, never, or a filmmaker, never used a 3D software in your life, but you can download a metahuman, you can put an environment together, and you can build a fairly grand looking piece without having to have tons of skill set building time, years of ramp up to that. We see people all the time taking 8 weeks and a couple of months of their life, and then at the end of it, they've gone from no CG at all to being able to make their own CG film, this is the first time that's ever been the case.
That's incredible. That makes me excited for the future of just filmmaking not only on a large scale, but maybe for a filmmaker who's listening who doesn't really have a budget or something like that wants to just create, like do a Guillermo del Toro kind of thing. He has the ability, or she has the ability to do that. So that's incredible. What is the name of your school, and how do people find out more about that?
Sure, we are called CG Pro. Our web address is becomecgpro.com, and we also have a couple of other resources. We have a free Facebook group which we put a lot of content into. That is Become CG Pro on Facebook. We have a YouTube channel which has a lot of content on there, a lot of webinars and free learning material. We also put our podcast up there, which we run every 2 weeks, the CG Pro podcast. And we're on Instagram and Twitch now, and I don't know, Jackie's like the head of the marketing department, so
yeah, we're expanding on different platforms like Twitter and stuff like that, but yeah, mostly I recommend the Facebook group because you're becoming part of a community and you're able to ask questions and get your questions answered, and from multiple people in the industry, because there's a lot of like the heads of, some of the top leaders in the industry are in our Facebook group now. And so you're able to really get your questions answered by lots of really, really talented people, not just us. So
That's fantastic. Ed, you had mentioned earlier, like just this journey you went through in terms of just the limiting beliefs, and something that I want to empower individuals with too, because both you guys have had a fantastic journey. And just sometimes the downturn, particularly with 2020, people feeling. I love what you said about people being able to be actors, being able to be home, order a mocap thing, and offer that service. So that's empowering. But what was the biggest limiting belief that you had to get through? You went from dreaming about working on Jurassic Park to really working on Jurassic World, you really kind of manifested your destiny, and then you've gone up from there. So what was the biggest limiting belief that you've gotten over, and then Jackie, for you as well?
Sure. Goodness, going to take me back there. Yeah, I mean, I remember a time where I was just absolutely crippled with self-doubt, and literally wondering whether I was going to be able to get a job in a supermarket. Like, not let alone going after my big fancy dream of working on Jurassic World. I was so lacking in confidence in myself that I just didn't know. I wasn't even sure that I would be able to get any kind of half decent job. So I really clearly remember that time where I just, I don't know, did not have any faith almost at all. I think what helped me get out of that, years of tormenting myself, and having some incredible guides along the way. Fortunately, I think, as I was going back to this idea of the what rather than the how, understanding what it was that I wanted to do was really key in it. And I had that quite early on, but I didn't have any confidence that I'd actually be able to make it happen. So I kind of went down this opposite path of getting a sensible job in software engineering, and which turned out not to be that sensible because I graduated right in the dot-com crash. There was no jobs. But I did find one, that was a great route because it ended up being a good skill set as a companion. But I think really just knowing what it was I loved and continuing to explore it and experiment with it and find other people that were interested in it. I became a VJ, so I had an outlet, which was really important because there was having some way of actually getting it out there and making it be real and people seeing stuff. And even though they were confused a lot of the time, thought I was a DJ, like, it was still moments where I knew that my work was being watched and enjoyed, and that really helped. Making it real really helped. Being around others really helped. When I wanted to finally really step it up, though, I knew I had to get around a better, a higher level production skill set group of people. So that's really where I went after the school, because that's where they were hanging out. And I tried to go to lots of events and meet people, but my skills were not good enough at that point. And getting somebody, I did manage to find a couple mentors before that. My friend Ollie Venning was a great encouragement to me in the early days, and getting into the VJing. And our friend Ed Cookson was a great supporter and mentor and friend. Having those guys around me was really, really important to get going. When I wanted to get into production level visual effects, I had to go find people that were specifically doing that, in commercials and movies. So just getting around the right people. Once I still felt the doubt. I still feel the self-doubt today. I don't think there's any real way of getting rid of that entirely. But surrounding yourself with the right people that are going to uplift you and help you and challenge you, and tell you the right things to be doing, tell you what you're doing that's not right, but supporting you throughout it. I think that is the most important thing, because on our own, as human beings, we don't work that well. I think we need a community around us to make stuff work. So that was really, some of the turning points for me, getting from understanding what it was I wanted to do, having just about enough confidence to go explore it, experiment with it, getting around other people who were doing it better than me, and learning from them and having ways to get it out in front of people. And then also working subsequently on personal skills as well as CG skills. We've done a lot of work in the kind of like personal development area, going and doing events and learning and training around things that are not anything to do with film or computer graphics, but all to do with leadership, essentially, leading yourself, and then being around those communities, done a lot of work in the Tony Robbins world, various other groups, to really, push ourselves and go further. And all of it has been really important. But yeah, I remember that kid, that sort of depressed, faithless kid, is still very clear in my mind. And it's still there, but just building layers on top of it, and connections and things to keep staying further and further away from that kid, and moving further towards having more goals, setting more goals for yourself all the time. That's how to keep growing and keep moving. Keep setting yourself a goal that's a little bit hairy and uncomfortable, and it'll keep you going. So sorry, that was slightly longer than I intended.
No, I love that. I think that's gonna help a lot of people. It's great. It's a great journey.
So in my journey, they say necessity is the mother of invention. And after college, my dad was like, okay, I paid for your college education, go get a job. And kind of wiped his hands clean of me. And I, it was, at the time, I remember feeling very angry about that. But when I got this internship, I called my dad up and I said, I've figured out, and one of the things I just wanted to add as a little aside was when I was watching this VFX demo that they were giving, it was actually someone who had worked on Jurassic Park and was showing the dinosaur that they had animated. And when I saw that, I was like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. And I didn't know if I could do it, but I just was so passionate about it that I called up my dad and I said, listen, they've offered me an unpaid internship. And I know that you said you weren't going to support me, but I really want to be able to do this. And he said he would do it for 6 months. So he helped me. And after 6 months, I started getting paid there. And I think part of it was definitely necessity, and there was passion there. After I started getting some progress and figuring out what value I could offer, that raised my self-esteem a little bit. And then I started wondering what else I could do. And so it was sort of that self-esteem sort of built on itself over time.
I love that. This has been great. I could talk to you guys all day. We're winding down. I ask all my guests this. When you think of the word creative, who comes to mind for you and why?
Well, at this particular moment, I would say there's a man named Paul Debevec who I'm like, he is this incredible scientist actually, but he does a lot of creative work and has massively changed the way that the visual effects industry is run. He's just an absolute wizard and someone that I really, really look up to. And even though it's funny, it's technical, but his technology advances have changed visual effects and creativity for everybody forever. So I guess I would say him.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you mentioned an engineer, scientist, because in essence, yeah, creativity is creativity. People always think of it as being art or music or something that's in the arts, but engineering and science and innovation are the essence of creativity, because it is creating something that hasn't been seen before, and it doesn't have to be a painting. And yeah, I think he's also a great artist, but yes, as a real innovator, is a really good example. I would definitely be a +1 on Paul for sure. And he actually lectured at my university back in the day. So while he was working on the Matrix, he came and spoke at my school. So that I remember that clearly as being a big inspiration to me as well. My journey. And yeah, I don't know, there's so many examples of it. Like, I'd say something cheesy, like we have 2 young children, 2 and 4 years old, and when I look at them, they make me understand creativity in a way that I never have before, because they're just completely not bound by rules. They just do what they feel like, and that experimentation and willingness to like do something, even though you're looking as a parent at them, go, no, don't do that, that's going to break or fall over or whatever it is. they're not bound by rules, and they're unafraid to experiment and try things out, which I think is the sort of the essence of the creative people that I respect the most. Are people who are most of us are kind of scared of trying things, for the most part, trying new things because we don't want to fail at them. And kids aren't like that. That's I definitely put our kids in there, and then some other artists, some grown-ups as well that I respect. I really love the work of Alex and Alison Gray as artists. They've really gone way out there with their art form and created some really refined expressions today of exploring what it is to be human and be spiritual, and refine that into a beautiful artwork. But going through the process of crazy amounts of experimentation and daring and risk. And I have so much admiration for them in their journey as artists, in how bold and daring that they've been, but how it's ended up in this beautiful expression through their artwork and through their community they built. And yeah, I would definitely put them in there on the more artistic end of.
Yeah, and I would say that it's been an honor to be able to work with them on a number of projects. We've helped them create some NFTs, and we've worked with them on a number of projects, and it's been amazing to get to meet people who are just so creative and so open in the visionary art world is really incredible. So.
Yeah, working with your heroes is pretty cool, and we're both lucky to have got to do that, and I definitely recommend it. Aspiring to work with people that you love and respect. There's, when you both get to be on the same page, you have to raise your vibration sometimes to interact with other people who are really, really pushing it in the world. They expect that. But that's the cool thing about it, is that you get to see, being next to people of that kind of caliber, what do you need to show up as? What do you need to bring out? And it brings the best from you when you're in an environment. That's why I think the environment part of it's so important. The people that you're around demand a certain level from you, and it's how you can get the most growth, I think, is being around other people who are, they're not just putting you down to try and make you reach a certain point. They're there shining that example for you of what's possible. So I think, being able to connect with people that you really respect is a fantastic way of trying to grow yourself.
I love that. Cool. And you mentioned how to connect with you earlier. Do you guys can you drop the Facebook group again, your website for the school and all that? And we can wrap up.
So the Facebook group is Becoming a CG Pro. And
it's actually Become CG Pro, so Facebook.
Oh yeah, I see if you search for it, it's Becoming a CG Pro, but the hyperlink for it is Become CG Pro, and becomecgpro.com is the actual our website. And then we also have on Instagram, it's Become CG Pro, and Twitter, actually I don't know the Twitter one right now, but
if anyone's interested in connecting, I guess the Facebook group is the right place to go. If anyone's interested in checking out our classes and courses, workshops, then becomecgpro.com, it would be the best place to go. And we're pretty findable on there. We're quite accessible. Feel free, anyone, to connect with us and send us a message.
Nice. Grateful to have you guys on. You guys are rock stars, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Appreciate it.